Good evening, Lagos. Good evening, Nigeria. Welcome to the big story here on Radio Now 95.3 FM Lagos. I am Zainab Balogun Olu. As we draw the curtain on 2024, we would focus on one of the most critical aspects of our nation and lives, and that's the issue of security. A nation can only thrive when it is secure. So today we take a reflective look at Nigeria's security situation in 2024. The security sector is one that has been of top concern for the whole of Nigeria, from the persistent fight against insurgency in the northeast to the ongoing battle with banditry and kidnapping in the northwest, to the separatist tensions in the southeast, to cyber and cross-border threats that transcend geographical boundaries. Despite significant efforts by our security agencies, the challenges remain, raising critical questions about the effectiveness of strategies, the state of coordination, and the role of governance in addressing these issues. So today on The Big Story, we would be looking at how far we have come in addressing these security challenges, what strategies worked, and where did we fall short, and most importantly, what the road ahead looks like for the fight against insecurity in 2025. Today on the program, I have two guests to talk about this. I have security analyst, Senator Iroegbu. Good evening, Mr. Iroegbu.
Good evening, Zainab.
Thank you so much.
Compliments of the season.
Yes, compliments of the season. Happy New Year in advance. It's less than 24 hours.
Thank you.
All right. I think we also have a retired Captain Bishop Johnson, is a former United States Army captain. Good evening, retired Captain Johnson.
Good evening, Zainab, and thank you for having me. Compliments of the season.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We really do appreciate your time. All right. Okay. So let's begin with Senator Iroegbu. How would you assess the overall security situation in Nigeria in 2024 if you compare it to previous years? I'll just give a background. And so that's the Nigerian military now. They've said a total of 8,034 terrorists have been neutralized by joint troops of the armed forces of Nigeria, while 11,623 suspects have been arrested, while 6,376 hostages have been rescued within the year. This is what the armed forces is saying. Now, if we compare to the report of the NBS, though that started last year up until this year in April, we saw that report which claimed talked about various rate of crimes in the country, talking about ransom payments of 2.2 trillion naira being paid, over 2.2 million Nigerians being kidnapped, over 600,000 persons being murdered. And so on this basis, how do we rate the security situation in 2020?
So I will rate it form of stabilizing, but still challenging, still not out of the woods, and stabilizing in a way that not really because of serious government. Yes, there's government effort, but in a way that Nigerians are beginning to adjust to the situation. For example, something that may trigger Nigerians, something that may, create uproar is no longer something that can trigger that. They are becoming numb to some of these issues. It's becoming like part of daily life. So, but there are some kind of some changes here and there. For example, the mass kidnap issues, like kidnapping people in their 100 or 50s from school, all those, it has, we have not witnessed such incidents like a year now, apart from the first one that happened during when Tinubu just took over, I think in Kaduna.
Yes.
We don't have, but that doesn't, diminish the number. That means, and that's where it is dangerous. Like the people are being kidnapped almost on daily basis in their twos, in their tens, in their 20s, and these are issues that doesn't make headline, and it becomes more dangerous. And since they don't make headline, there's no much pressure on government to, because it doesn't attract headline. Unlike when people are kidnapping 100, then government will use it as part of PR as well. But now, and a lot of this kidnapping is happening in their, like I said, in their twos, in their threes, in their five, in their tens, in their 20s, and in some rural communities where there is no much reportage going around them. So these are then some issues of insecurity have taken like backseat compared to when I say insecurity. Sometimes we have a traditional definition of security or insecurity. In the classical sense of security, it has taken backseat. The issue of economy survival, economy recovery. So most Nigerians are enamored on issue of the economy, how to survive, how to beat inflation, how to, the first subsidy issues, refineries, all those things, and which is also where most of government PR mechanism and effort are dedicated to. So it's not as if something is not happening on the security sector, but it now took the back seat. So it doesn't draw the headline, except if there's a deliberate effort like a report, like the NBS, that now will draw people's attention back to it. That, something, a lot is also happening that people are not really aware of. Because most Nigerians are trying to survive on their own, that they care less of what is happening to their next door neighbor. So that is the situation we find ourselves right now. So when I say a bit stabilized, is that the issue, like also the rate of suicide bombings and all this has also reduced, but it doesn't mean that the terrorism is not happening. Once in a while, we also hear terrorist attack in the northeast, and some about 3 local government areas are still being heavily terrorized by the terrorists that people cannot go back there, which was also attested by the governor of Borno State himself. So this is the kind of the situation. Then you check the issue of food insecurity. So when I also talked about we are still looking at insecurity from the traditional sense, that the kinetic aspect. When you look at security or insecurity generally from human security angle, you also see that it's an issue like food security, economic security, environmental security. So these are issues, social security, how secure Nigeria, did they have 3 square meal in a day? And that's why you see crimes, criminalities are increasing. People, are afraid they may not be able to secure their meal. How are they going to survive? So people are resorted to crimes. Economically, people don't feel much secure, and that is the issue of economic security. Okay. Then the issue of environmental issue, like the flooding, the desertification, and all those. Then we also have the transnational crimes and criminalities. What is happening now in the Sahel region, in our northern neighbors, something that is also troubling. We should look at, and with the recent back and forth between Nigeria and Niger, and also the great power barrier that's happening across. I'm just giving a general overview. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, we'll still come to that, talking about Niger and talking about, transnational security as well. But let me quickly come to Captain Johnson. How do you evaluate the military's efforts in, combating terrorism? If you're talking about insurgency and also talking about banditry and Boko Haram, how do you evaluate, their efforts in 2024?
Okay. Good evening, and thank you for having me. I'm going to put it in the context of.
Okay. Captain Johnson, you sound far off from your phone.
Can you hear me?
Not really.
Okay, can you hear me?
Okay, I think it's a bit better. It's just kind of low.
Okay, but can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Okay, so let me put it in a perspective of this administration from May 29th, 2023, when this administration came into office. Now, when the administration came into office, there were still pending insecurity problems across the country. Now, those security problems still remain. However, but if you follow them, if you have been following them, you will see that there is deliberate effort. There's a deliberate effort on the part of the armed forces to take measures to bring down the level of insecurity in the country. The insecurity is still high based on the statistics that were released by the armed forces themselves and the ones that came from the MBS, in which Nigerians had spent, trillions in ransoms. So it still tells us that, look, there is a deliberate attempt to reduce insecurity. We still have a lot more to do. And this is because most of the times we are focused on the kinetic measures that are being taken by the military, such as neutralization of bandits and terrorists or non-government or whatever you want to call them. Now, leaving out all the other measures and steps that need to be taken. If we want to get down insecurity in Nigeria, there has to be a very holistic approach to it that is going to not just the armed forces utilizing any measures, but also going to require the political class to be able to provide governance, right? You also have to look at the issue of border control and border management. Because if you look at where some of all this insecurity are taking place, they are mostly in northern segment of the country at the border areas, because we have very porous borders. So even if you reduce the level of insecurity within the country, it's only a matter of time before there's influx of criminals again from our porous borders into the country. So to put it, in context, we have to do more in reducing insecurity by leveraging on every other aspect of the responsibilities of every security agency in the country, not just the armed forces. The police has to play their role, the immigration has to play its role, the civil defense, the prisons, all of the security paraphernalia of the country must be able to play their individual roles.
Okay.
If we don't do that, the military will only be going in circles. Bandits will flow into the country, they will neutralize the ones they can neutralize, new ones will come in, they will neutralize the ones they can neutralize, and they will just continue to go in circles like that until we are able to put our hands on all of these areas I am talking about. So that is why it doesn't seem like a lot of progress is being made, because all of these other angles to dealing with this insecurity have not actually been properly, addressed.
Okay. So would you say that the level of coordination between the military, the police, and other security agencies in, tackling insecurity has been poor? That's one question. And you also talked about how we focus more on the kinetic approach. Now, let me ask you how the military has been able to adapt to some of this insecurity or the security situation in the country. And I'll ask this way: if you think that there has been noticeable shifts in the tactics or strategies of some of this insurgents group. We know how we say, okay, it is insurgency in the northeast, banditry and kidnapping in the northwest. But we've seen that dynamics change with Lakorawa emerging and, that being in the northwest. So how do you think this insurgents have been able to, change their tactics? And do you think that the military has been able to, adapt to counter them? Then the other question of what you think about the level of coordination between the military and other security agencies.
Okay, let me take the first question about the synergy between the various security agencies in the country. There seems to be some level of coordination, but that level of coordination is not where it's supposed to be for us to be able to achieve our strategic objective of reducing insecurity in the country. Now, make no mistake, there is no country in the world where you're going to have absolute security. Okay. What you have across the globe is relative security, which is the security that is enough for people to go about their normal daily activities. You're not going to zero-sum security in Nigeria or anywhere in the world. Now, the synergy is not where it needs to be. The coordination between the armed forces, the police, and all the paramilitaries is not yet there. The way intelligence is used is not there. You know, who gathers intel, how it is analyzed, disseminated, and who is actually the end user of intelligence has not actually been properly coordinated. That is number one. We can improve on that. And one of the ways we can also improve on that is by bringing in the citizens themselves. The citizens themselves have to be a part of that coordination we're talking about, not just the security agencies themselves, but also the citizens themselves, because they are going to mostly be the source of intel for those who use the end users of intelligence.
Okay.
That is what I can say about that. So that coordination is not where it needs to be. In fact, it's not even up to 40% of where it needs to be. There has to be more coordination between the armed forces, the police, the paramilitary, and the citizenry. Now, on the issue of governance, you see, the military can adapt kinetic aspects to bring down insecurity, but it has a limit. There's a limitation to that. The military can't provide governance. Governance has to be provided by our political leaders. The governors, local government chairmen, will now have to provide that governance. And that area is lacking grossly. As you are aware, in most states of this country, the local government administration is paralyzed. And this is the closest level of government to the people. But in most of the states, that level of government is almost non-existent. And most of the insecurity that emanates in this country emanates from the rural areas, from those local government levels. And so there is very little government presence in most of the rural areas in this country where these insecurities always emanate. So dealing with it, the non-kinetic aspect of it is to strengthen our local government administration. Implement fully and firmly and strongly the Supreme Court judgment that gave local government autonomy. Unfortunately, there are state governors who are circumventing that ruling. They're finding smart ways to go around it and circumventing that Supreme Court ruling. So that is what we have to also look into. We must have strong local government administration to be able to increase governance presence and also be able to reduce the level of ungoverned spaces in Nigeria where all these terrorists and bandits and criminals are exploited. So they are seeing all these loopholes and they are exploiting those loopholes that we have either advertently or inadvertently created. And so they are adapting because insecurity always evolves. So they are looking at all these situations and they are also evolving and adapting to be able to exploit all of those lapses that we had either inadvertently or advertently created by weakening our local government structures.
Okay. All right, I'll come back to you, Captain Johnson, because you made a valid point talking about how we need to strengthen the local government and also, at the state level, because sometimes it looks as if we're looking at the federal government to solve all of the issue of insecurity. But are we also looking at the state government and, just like you said, the local government? But we'll come back to that. Let me come to Senator Iroegu. There's a separatist agitation in the southeast. There's the farmer headers clash, as well in some parts of the north central. But let's talk about the separatist agitation. How do you assess the government's approach to addressing these challenges? We've seen that also happen in the southwest, this separatist agitation. We've heard people say, okay, releasing Nnamdi Kanu, it will end all of this separatist agitation in the southeast. We've seen Simon Ekpa also arrested, but it seems like it's a movement, and there is someone else, Ngozi Orabueze, who is also continuing, that movement, right? And there's a sit at home, which they said, okay, with the arrest of Simon Ekpa, it will reduce that, it will stop it, but it has continued. So how do you think the government has been able to address these challenges?
I think in that aspect, government have not really done much, apart from still adopting the same policy of purely kinetic approach. And as we have both noted here, I and Bishop Johnson, that relying purely on kinetic, yes, the kinetic approach is needed, but if you don't follow it up with other measures, the other non-kinetic measures, it will not be sustainable. So for the separatist agitation, I think for what you are witnessing, there's a law in some of these agitation. It's not as violently or vigorous as it used to be. I think even in the southwest, which is, we can attribute it to some of goodwill the present government is enjoying because of also the ethno-regional politics we play. Maybe they're giving him some benefit of doubt. Okay, they don't want to wreck his government, but I think it's filtering away that goodwill to even engage. The administration have not really engaged. And we noted the issue of that kinetic and not kinetic. There should be engagement. Some of these things, something that political will. It takes some political engagement, behind the scene negotiation, to even resolve. And people have already advised and concluded that some of these issues, like Nnamdi Kanu case, yes, there's a legal process that is going on. Even during the Buhari administration, some of the Southeast and Igbo elders met him, and I told him that this will not be. Yes, the legal process is going on, but it's something that politically can be resolved, and which also brings me to some of the conflict and crisis we're facing in Nigeria. Yeah, that some of this thing is something that needed some structural adjustment, can just resolve it, like the local governance system Bish talked about. Some just more dialogue and political engagement, some systemic changes. If talk about community policing, state policing, you mentioned that, yes, that most time we focus on federal government when it comes to issue of insecurity. But why most people are focusing? Because they only have the enforcement power. It's only federal government that have most of the enforcement power. When it comes to issue of enforcing some of the issues, like they control the police, they control the army, they control all the enforcement institutions. So it is not decentralized. The police or other arms can only obey the state governor to the extent that state governor have a good relationship with them or with the federal government. So these are some of the issues. So coming back to the issue of it's issue of looking for some political solution, negotiation. First, starting with the releasing Kanu, from the which even court have ruled that he should be granted bail.
So do you think that will solve the problem?
No, it's a starting point. That's what I say first. It's a starting point. One thing about looking for solution is that you can't stand still doing the same thing over and over. Just try. If it doesn't work, you try another means. So if you release him, you assess and check whether there may be some changes. If it doesn't work, you think other measures that will. But as it stands, keeping him in prison has not helped. It didn't solve any issue as it stands. Instead, since he went to prison, the situation escalated. We have been having sit at home in the southeast with huge economic loss, and we talk about economic security, and it affected that region now, for which is part of the country, except if the federal government have decided that they've ceded that part of the country to non-state actors, and we are talking about ungoverned spaces. Okay. So if federal government really care about what is happening in that region, and they really ensure that the economic activities, they should do something they cannot just keep quiet and allow things to continue the way it is. And not keeping quiet doesn't mean that they just continue sending soldiers and police, creating gridlock here and there as if it's an occupation force in the eyes of the people. So there should be other measures that can be taken to resolve this. It can be political, it can be social, it can be structural. There are other measures which I think government have not really taken time to look at it. Okay. So these are some of things I feel that there should be engagement. It can be direct or indirect. Okay. But definitely there should be form of engagement, yes.
Okay. So I was going to ask you if maybe this is where the issue of state police comes in, since you've said that the federal government is the one that, controls and enforces, the rest of the security agencies. So maybe if the state police comes in, the state's government, at their level will be able to also, direct the security operatives to combat whatever insecurity they're facing in their states. Do you think so?
Yes. Yes, state policing is part of the whole of a larger package. It's just a part of it. Most of us have been advocates. Yes, people have raised some reservation about state policing because of the overbearing nature of the governors. But it can be structured in such a way. One thing that globally, in every you look at the pros and cons. Okay. If the advantages overwhelm the disadvantages, you go ahead and then look at how to minimize the disadvantage.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that state policing, when it comes, it can be perfect. But people are projecting that in a federal system, this is how it works. You have to have a decentralized policing system. This is how federal governance works all across board. Okay. But in Nigeria, we have an anomaly where we say we practice federal system, but a centralized policing and security structure. So it should come with that, with the local governance system that Bish talked about, strengthen as well. Okay. And the issue of the resource issue should also be looked at, where states should have a kind of freedom in a lot of things to be able to utilize what they have, so that they can fund a lot of these things, and then get the responsibility they felt.
All right, Mr. Iregu. Let me come back to Captain Johnson now, because we have to wrap up. You've talked about how the relationship between the local communities and the military and security agencies need to be strengthened. What steps do you think can be taken to improve trust and cooperation between the civilians and the security operatives? Because the DHQ has also said that it is impossible to defeat terrorism, insurgency, banditry without the cooperation of the people. We saw in that MBS report, they said the people will rather, solve their issues of insecurity by themselves rather than report to security operatives because they do not trust them. And maybe it comes to the issue of these airstrikes again that we have seen, killing certain civilians. They say it was secondary explosion. That was in Sokoto. So I'm wondering how a secondary explosion, would happen. And we've seen this happen, in 2024. It happened in Kaduna, where civilians end up dying. So how do people then trust the military when they feel like at the end of the day they are not being protected?
Okay. The issue of trust deficit is not peculiar to the military itself. There is a trust gap between the people and institutions. Nigerians generally don't trust public institutions. And part of the reason why they don't trust public institutions is because of high level of corruption. So you see that to be able to deal with the insecurity, we need to bring in the people. To be able to bring in the people, we also have to reduce the level of corruption in the system, so that institutions can function to the service of the people. When institutions function to the service of the people, they will be able to regain the trust of the people. And when they regain the trust of the people, that is when the people will be disposed to working with them. It's going to take a while, but it can start somewhere. And part of that process still goes back to the issue of governance. There has to be that governance. And that governance cannot only be provided by the federal government. The central government is doing its best. Or is putting some good effort. But that effort has to be complemented by the various subnational governments. Our state governments, the local government, our governors in most cases seem to be, vampires. They are providing governance at the state level.
All right, Captain Johnson. Sadly, we have to wrap up. But in 30 seconds, if you may, what specific reforms? I mean, from your time of, your time in service, what specific reforms or strategies would you recommend for the military to adopt in 2025? If you're looking at nationally and also looking at cross-border terrorism as well and securing our borders, in 30 seconds, if you may.
Okay, if you go back to what I said, the military alone can't solve this problem, right? The military may not even need to change the strategy they are using right now. But what must change is the strategic measures that are being put in place, such as ensuring that our borders are secured, the police ensuring that there is minimal crime in our institutions, for example, corruption and all of that. So it has to be like a whole. If you narrow it down to what the military has to do, the military can't succeed. Because they would not be able to function in isolation of all these other measures that must be put in place and that must be effective. For example, if you don't secure the border, there will still be influx of small arms and light weapons. There will still be inflow of terrorists and bandits. And so you discover that no matter the strategy that the military adopts, the whole cycle of terror and destruction and all of that is going to continue.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Captain Johnson. Mr. Iroegbu, in 30 seconds as well, what reforms do you think needs to be adopted in 2025?
The reforms that needed is to continue strengthening the local governance system. Yes, I support the local governance autonomy and local governance system, but the Supreme Court judgment needs to be followed up with more legislative support and work. I think the federal government shouldn't just rest and think it's something that can be imposed from the center. It makes it look at an imposition, the way the government went about it. That's the central government, the federal government. Right. So they need to carry the constituent structures like the states along through the legislature. There needs to be more legislation to look at the laws in itself, so that we can break down some of the things that give the governors more leverage to circumvent the whatever ruling that. So if we can get the local governance system very well, then the issue of ungoverned spaces can start being addressed, realistically.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Iroegbu. Thank you so much, Captain Johnson, for being on the program. We really do appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful last day of the year and a prosperous 2025.
All right, thank you so much. I wish you the same, and hopefully the security situation will even be better in 2025. Yeah, we really do appreciate your time. We have been taking a look at a review of Nigeria's security situation in Nigeria. Looking at 2024, I had security analyst Senator Regbu and retired Captain Bishop Johnson, who is a former United States Army captain. We'll take some messages and you can join me on the round table.
Witness the evolution of a nation and proudly partner with its people on their path to prosperity. From the ink-stained ledgers to fast transactions, First Bank has consistently adapted, embracing innovation